by two Veronica tones.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
What do you want to do? My God, it's full of stars.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. I'm your regular host, Scott Weatherly, and as always, I'm joined by Julian Darius. Julian, how are you doing? You okay?
I'm doing fine. Running away from dogs because I'm terrified of them after this episode.
Yeah, that's right. Today we are going to be Metalheads. That's right. We are up to episode 5 of season 4 of Black Mirror, Metalhead. In the post-apocalyptic landscape of the Scottish moors, a woman attempts to survive a land full of dogs, which is these small robotic things. What were your thoughts on this episode?
I kind of love this episode. It really isn't about anything. It's shot in black and white, and my first thought is sort of why. But
Yeah.
damned if it doesn't work, and it does feel gritty, and maybe it hides, some special effects issues. But really, you don't know anything about what this dystopian sort of landscape is. And it's basically a sort of like Fury Road sort of chase scene that lasts, 41 minutes. But you really feel for it. It really is a great tale of survival being pursued by, one robot. And that robot is a robotic dog. It manages to be so scary without being like a badass,
Terminator.
Dark Knight, heavy metal, take 3, kind of, stupid, wannabe scary stuff. It's just a practical machine. So I kind of love this episode. It's really entertaining from start to finish.
No, I'm the same. I thought this was great. I was really impressed. Just this idea, and again, the sort of the suggestion as well at the end, it actually has like an emotional impact for me. Like I feel this is, the black and white thing as well. I can take or leave. I think they want to show how desolate this place is, and as you say, it's got that sort of Fury Road kind of feel to it. It's a bit of a one-person kind of show. It's a actress called Maxine Peake who is relatively well known in British circles. She's been in a whole bunch of things. So I've seen her loads of times. I think she's great. But I love the fact that this is just a sort of it's just a chase scene. It's just like it's relentless. But this little thing, it's not big either. When you say a dog, like it's not a big dog. Like this is not a massive lumbering tank. It's just a small kind of thing. It's got a gun in its arm. And it just is persistent, like it just keeps coming. It's like the Terminator. What I like is the fact that this is kind of practical. Like the Terminator is a fantastic idea. I love the Terminator films, but the sort of in all reality, the T-800 is kind of impractical as a sort of a design and to be multiple produced. These ideas, like you see it in the robots that we're producing today, the four-legged ones and stuff that we see that are being used to sort of like service robots and these other bits that are coming through, very much like this robot in this. They're able to address multiple terrain. They can keep the balance. They can carry heavy loads. It just seems incredibly practical. One of the things we said about the last episode, which I'm going to fully acknowledge up front, is its lack of world building.
Mm-hmm.
This episode too has a lack of world building. However, it works here because you don't need the knowledge for the story to work. I don't know, but I just wanted to throw that in. I wanted to acknowledge before people say, well, they don't cover off everything. You don't know where the robots come from. You don't know what's going on. You're right, we don't. But this works regardless, right? Well, the last episode didn't. I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, I am a little troubled by that. I'm troubled by that a little more than you are. and it's mostly the ending. So, at the end, basically, she slits her own throat, right? Like she doesn't make it back, which I love, right? I mean, I write most of my stories end with like, unhappily, not all of them, but a lot of them. So, I like that. But then at the end, we find out that what they were trying to steal was a teddy bear for this dying, Jack, right? It was presumably a dying kid. And I think, well, that was
it's a replacement teddy for one he's lost.
Right. And I think, well, that was stupid. You risked everybody's life. Like, they clearly perceived danger. They didn't know there was a dog there. But I mean, like, you've just lost 3 people. So in order to retrieve a teddy bear, and yeah, I mean, I guess that can be heartwarming. But in order for me to care about that, I mean, I get that it's a kind of cynical little jab in the eye, but it feels like a cynical little jab in the eye to me. Like, in order for that to matter, I kind of have to know, like, how desperate are you for resources that, like, clearly it can't be that bad, because if it is that bad and you've risked 3 people's lives, like in a Terminator-like resistance to get a teddy bear, you guys deserve to die. Like, that was stupid. So I'm kind of a little annoyed by that. And I do kind of want to know at least how far this base is, right? Like, could she conceivably walk back?
This is
a
where
little bit more of that I would like.
Yeah. No, I agree. This is where, I mean, I don't need to know where the robots come from, but this is where a flashback of some kind at some point of her arguing, maybe like someone saying, "This is ridiculous. You can't sacrifice people. I'm not going to give you the resources to go out and do this mission. It's stupid. It's not worth it." And her saying, "Well, I'm going to go anyway." And then the 2 people that are with her saying, "Well, I'm volunteering to go with you." And even if one of them justifies it by saying, like, "We don't know what else is in that warehouse. We might find some good stuff that we're desperate for." Just give me that, like a 30-second, 1-minute little scene as a flashback. And then you can go, all right, cool. That's how this sort of thing came about. And it's gone pear-shaped. And it was a bit of a, it wasn't just about the teddy bear sort of thing. I agree that would be helpful and would elevate this a bit more.
No, I agree with all of that. And I think you could do it in 30 seconds. But to your point about, sort of, we find ourselves, I think, doing Black Mirror kind of constantly running up against our own biases and our own potential hypocrisies. How
dare you? I'm no hypocrite.
Well, I am. And I found myself feeling that way in multiple episodes where, like the second episode of the season, I thought was sort of didn't have a lot of plot holes, but just kind of like was kind of masterfully done, but sort of left me dry, the Archangel. And then the next one, which is that sort of Nordic noir
Crocodile,
thing,
yeah.
Right. I liked better, even though it's got bigger problems, right? But it worked for me. And I think that, at the end of the day, when we talk about like that movie magic, right? Like, I mean, Back to the Future is a daft plot, but almost everything in it works, right? It just sells itself. And the last episode didn't sell itself, especially for you. This episode really sells itself for both of us. And basically that comes down to, I really feel that urge to survive, right? That desperate sort of like up against it. This thing is not going to stop, even if it's a dog instead of a Terminator. It is very much that Terminator dynamic. But damned if I don't feel that more here than I do in any of the Terminator films. You might disagree with that, but I mean, I really feel, especially in this compressed space, like that I am up against it. I am wounded. I don't have, a T-800 to assist me or something,
Well, I think this is hearkening. This is one of the things that, it's funny you say that, because it crossed my mind. This made me think of the first Terminator film, which is very much more that relentless, low budget, sort of gritty pursuit film. But watching this, not so much in black and white, but that desolate landscape, this made me think like, oh, this is what Terminator Salvation should have been. or at least a part of Terminator Salvation should have been something like this. And that's where I was like, oh, yeah. And then, so, yeah, I was bought into it, probably because of those being preferences of mine, that franchise. So I know what you're saying. Yes.
Well, and I agree with you about Terminator Salvation, right? It's like, I want that desperation, right? The other thing I thought of watching this was, and this is a deep cut, is Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future,
Mm-hmm.
which I recently was rewatching, and it's quite good. Especially for a kids show, it's quite dark, right from the first episode, and that really sells like, okay, so we've got power suits and everything else, but it sells that like Terminator, like that was Terminator Salvation before Terminator Salvation, where it's like we are a small gang, we are up against it, and like we're lucky when we encounter other humans and they're scared of us, and it sells something of that sense of desperation. Whereas like Salvation is like, we have a military encampment with, airplanes and everything else. And, it's like, right, this feels more like a military base in Transformers than it does, the last stand of humanity.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought about as an influence for this, or something that was clearly to be taken into consideration, was obviously this came out in 2017. This thing of being in a post-apocalyptic world and then pursued by something like Walking Dead, clearly felt like this is they can't do zombies really in Black Mirror. I'm sure they could find a way, but this felt a little bit like, oh, this is going to be our Walking Dead kind of episode. We're going to go for that bleakness of that sort of world. And I was a fan of that fact for a number of seasons before it dropped off. So I appreciate that attempt as well at that sort of aesthetic. And it mostly kind of works.
No, I thought about that too. And that's not just like The Walking Dead is less about the pursuit of like the zombies after you, right? Because it's all interpersonal conflicts and stuff, but more that sense of grittiness, when it works, is that sense of grittiness and tough choices and desperation. And I think movies like this or episodes like this kind of trigger. There's a part of my brain that just goes like, right, the things we will do as an organism to survive, that's powerful. And, but I also have to say, I love that dog's design. I love the logic of how it's pursuing, like it doesn't give up, but it's also not, perfect. There's a lot of smart little bits, like her up in the tree. The dog can't go, so she's, testing it to see, when its battery is going to run down so she can run. I mean, there's a lot of just smart little sequences in this that, much like Fury Road, they're not about dialogue. I wonder, like, what the hell did the script look like? It's not. I wonder that sometimes. Like, was this a 45-page script? I mean, or is this like a 20-page? Then this happens. Then this happens. But it's got a lot of. I mean, I like that house. Sort of her realizing the dog is in the house. And finding the dead body. That was a very Walking Dead kind of moment. But again, it's like that movie magic, right? Like things work or they don't. And there are a lot of bad scripts that work in cinema or in comics too. You just have synergy with an artist and a writer. And then there are a lot of really smart scripts, or scripts with great ideas that just don't work in practice because the actor's not right or the, cinematographer is not going for it or whatever. Or just the editing holds on, you hold on an extra half second and it makes you doubt, that macho guy, or totally change the feel of the moment, the scene. So I don't know. Just everything works in this episode for me.
No, I agree. I find this episode really entertaining. I think say there's that desperation. There's moments of real like fear, like you say, where it works, and the relentlessness of the robot, like the bit that really sort of made me uncomfortable. And then maybe it's just, I think it's a personal thing, but when she's because the pursuits look good as well, and the dog robot thing like jumps into the back of the van, and it doesn't just shoot, like it blows the guy's head off, like it just so like it's really gory, but like in black and white, so you can get away with it. But then it ends up like crashing, but she skids and the car just goes over the edge. And she's trying to get out of that car just as it goes over the edge, and then the dog appears on the window. And that whole sequence, then it smashes its way into the car and then goes over she manages to get out, but then the car goes over. First thing is, I'm sure this might even be a budgetary thing, but I don't know. But the fact that they don't explode the car, little things like that, where I was like,
the fact that it's obviously the same car, right? Yeah. I mean, it doesn't turn into a sedan as it falls, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's legit. They've tumbled this car down the hill, but then when it goes into the car and the robot's got its leg stuck and it's trying to get out, and eventually it's just doing it, and it's not like a desperation thing. It's just doing it enough. You quickly learn to snap it. That's what it's trying to do. Like, it doesn't have the leverage to snap its own leg off at that point, but it does it enough. It's like, okay, I can't get it out. Snaps it off and then shoots off like the remnant of it and stuff. I was like, that's cool. That's a good idea. It's got like clip-on legs, which I'm sure will be replaceable, but like at this point, it's a little bit of a handicap.
Yeah, I mean, I have a very minor quibble with that scene. I did sort of rewind it to watch that, because I was like, I think I read that right, but I sort of had to rewind it. It was one of a few moments where I kind of had to go back and look. And that was the same thing that I saw. But then in retrospect, that little, what confused me about it was that little nub that's left. And it's clear to me that what probably happened is, in an earlier draft, you've got its leg stuck and it breaks it off so that it can continue pursuing. But then later on, there's the idea of it uses that nub to sort of have a claw come out, and it grabs this knife, which it uses quite horrifically, sort of twirling into the wall. I quite like that effect. But having that nub, logically what it should have done is just detach the leg, detach the foot there instead of break. It doesn't need to break it off.
No, I agree.
So that's a minor quibble.
Yeah.
And I think what confused me was seeing it then detach the broken part. Just kind of confused me. And if you had it just detach it, you wouldn't have that momentary confusion that I experienced.
No, I agree with that.
Pretty minor quibble.
Yeah, no, I agree. I know what you're saying though. Because there's other parts of it design. Like, I like the fact that it has like a very small little thing that sort of shoots out and sort of is like a shrapnel kind of thing. And at first I was like, well, that's kind of weird. Like, it hasn't really killed anyone. It's a bit pointless. But then you realise that within that are a number of tracking devices. And it embeds in the person. So that's what it's not tracking the person, because you'd be like, oh, how's it? It's got a tracking device. She's got it embedded in her leg. And she cuts it out and puts it in the bottle to then float down the stream and stuff. And I liked all that as well. I thought that was good, Because the other thing I was thinking about, again, these films are, 10 a penny, but it's got that Predator feel as well. Like, that being pursued by something that's tracking you. But then it's able to continue. But then it gets to the end where, when it's dying, when she's blown it, she blows its head off. She gets hold of a shotgun from the dead person she comes across, blows its head off. But in response to it, it fires out another tracking device. And you see how bleak this is. And that's the thing where she sort of she knows that it sent out a signal because it can't track it anymore. And so there's more coming. And that, what I was kind of interested in is, we'll go around all over on the episode, but that moment at the end, because we've gone through we've gone through technology. She's got this thing. She's going to cut it out of her face, and she sort of messages base and says she's not coming home. Because this is a female lead, female protagonist. I wanted your thoughts, because she chooses to commit suicide. She's going to slit her own throat. You don't see it, but it sort of pans out and then when it scans over the landscape, you see these other dogs coming. I feel that if this was a male lead, or if they'd given the protagonist, he would have found an extra couple of shotgun rounds, and it would have been well, if I'm going out, I'm taking several of these with me, kind of. Do you know what I mean? There'd have been a bit more of a gung ho kind of thing, and I'm kind of glad they didn't do that. I didn't want that. But I was curious to, do you think having a female lead in this made a difference, or makes it different?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think it probably makes it better. It probably makes it more interesting. Because it can sort of dramatize that need to survive. In a way that we feel less for male characters under physical duress, right? We're sort of, our cultural bias is toughen up, like, oh, right, so he's limping. Well, I guess he's not, Jason Bourne or, Arnold Schwarzenegger. They don't limp, So I think it does sort of help that grittiness. But I also really felt at the end where she's got the shrapnel and you see that it's embedded several places in her face. And then she sees that it's embedded in her neck and it's sort of near an artery. So I'm reading the scene. So she sort of realizes that she can't cut it out without killing herself. So there's no chance to really, she's ready to mutilate her face. And I think that is very gender, right? If it's a man, you just say, right, cut your face, you're gonna look macho, you'll be Snake Plissken, but then it's a woman, so cutting your face being prepared to cut your face is obviously very gendered, and it feels like a very big deal. What were your thoughts about the main character being a woman?
Yeah, it's one of those. It's sort of 50-50. I think there are many parts of it where like it's irrelevant, and I think I'm glad they made it. It's irrelevant. It could be done as any. But then but having her in certain scenes, it reduces that the expectation of machoism. Not to say that she is scared. I mean, I think any character would be. That's the point. It's the fear. It's the running. But there's almost like as you said, like an expected machoism when it's a male protagonist. Like it's he'll jump on the dog thing and try and sort of like I'll take. Do you know what I mean? There'll be those kinds of things. With this, it's more about okay, this is on the run. I've got to think about this. It's more considered. I think it feels. By removing that machoism, like you get actually a sort of a smarter chase film, but like like you say, it feels more natural. It feels more authentic. Because I'm not gonna lie, like in reality, male or female, like any of this would be exactly the same. Just keep fucking running, just whatever you do to get away. Like as you say, I'm not Snake Plissken or any character like that. I wouldn't be trying to take it on in hand-to-hand combat or whatever. Like. It's and so I'm glad that that's not there as an expectation because I think it builds on that thing of how relentless this thing is. I'm glad, but I'm also glad she's not the damsel in distress. Like she's not the original Sarah Connor to say like she's like you said she's willing. She stops and she's able to cut this tracker out of her leg. She knows what to do with it. Dumps it in the river so it floats away. She's willing to cut her face. She's able to handle that gun with there's clearly been some knowledge there. It feels like she's empowered, like she knows what she's doing. She's got agency, but she's not Black Widow either. Like she's not jumping around and taking out people like 3 times her size and stuff. Like she's all that.
Yeah, I really hate that stuff. Yeah, I mean this is much more in this sort of like Ellen Ripley Furiosa mold, where she's serious. She's a competent, adult trying to survive, somebody who's trained, but, she's allowed to feel pain in a way that shows and movies struggle to show men, feeling pain, right? They're supposed to just power through. And if they don't, then you're like, why are you whining so much? Just cut that tracker out of your leg, buddy. You got to do what you got to do, So I do think it's better and certainly more interesting because it's a woman.
Yeah. No, and I think this is where we've said before of some of the choices that were made for past episodes where they're not leaning into things enough, or not going to be trying to be subversive enough. I mean, I don't think this is hugely subversive or anything, but I like some of the choices they're making that are actually sort of making it more interesting. It's sort of it's working to be on that interesting thing. I mean, this feels looking back at the previous episodes, this is where they saved their budget. This is where they were like, cool, the cheap episode. And but it doesn't feel like that. Like, the cast is, I think, 3 people, 2 cars, and then this robot thing. I think that's obviously where, some of it's got to be CGI, some of it's probably, I don't know if it's practical or not, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it looks CGI to me. I mean, it's got that very polygon kind of shape. I love its design. I love the way it folds up,
Yeah, sits down. Yeah.
That's very realistic, right? You can move it around. It's compact, but it's intelligent and folds up and then, opens out and then is a, all-terrain killer. But yeah, that's true, right? I like the small cast, right? I mean, there's basically 3 characters, 2 of which are dead, 3 minutes in. And, but I don't know how much budget they saved. I mean, the CGI on that robot can't be cheap. And they did apparently like demolish a van. I guess you could buy the van cheap and say, it doesn't have to work. We're going to throw it off a cliff, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't think either of those cars were, looking at the models, because they're both British cars, but neither of those were recent models, as in, so I'm sure they were, a couple of years old, and they were like, cool, kicking it over a cliff face. That'd be quite good fun.
If Michael Bay were directing this, he would say, we need it to be a new Porsche. It's got to be the sexiest thing you've ever imagined. And then we're going to blow up 5 of them.
Yeah. Yes, it's going to be the biggest explosion you've ever seen on screen from a single car. It's going to rival Oppenheimer for its explosion.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, the other thing worth noting is some of the cinematography in this is really good. And I think that it does a really good job, especially at the ending with the sort of drone shots and sort of flying over some of the landscape that you've covered and seeing the miscellaneous little bits of devastation. And there's something that I really like, and I don't know if it's just my brain, but there's something that I really like in action movies, especially where you have a sense of space, but you also have a sense of sort of from overhead or from an establishing shot of kind of like these different spaces and these different debris that's been left from these encounters, and just thinking in the same way that like that house is locked up, but it's been left in a very particular state for somebody to encounter, right? Almost video game like, right? And it is very Walking Dead. But in the same way, the warehouse and the all the car going over the cliff, the other car being left on the side of the road. There are all these particular scenes and particular spaces and particular debris fields caused by these events that somebody else might encounter, or that we don't know what else is going on, if somebody is going to clean it up or what. But I do love this sense of space and the sense of reconnecting with all of those sites that's done at the end. And that really tickles my spatial brain or something like that. I don't know.
No, I agree. That's the thing about it. It's like you said about how sort of poetic, and I think that's a really good way of describing this episode. Is that sort of thing? There's like a visual poetry to this episode. Like it wants to give you an idea of space and an idea of like desolation and all this other stuff, and it does that I think really well. And some of those drone shots are fantastic. I mean, it makes me wonder, like that because this is about desperation. Like if this was in color, would it be as effective? Would it be a bit flatter? Because there are films, there's scenes, but in the warehouse, like they've got it lit so it comes through in a certain way, and I'm like, okay, this is set up to be black and white. Like you can see the lighting, but there's other bits where I'm like, no, it's just a Scottish landscape. Like it's going to be green, and there'll be bits of heather, and whatever. So like, would it look as desolate, or would it look as poetic or as effective if it was in color? And I was trying to sort of figure that out in my head, really.
Yeah, I sort of feel that, I mean, it definitely sells the desolation, but I sort of feel that in color, like all those nature scenes are going to be like so lush and verdant, and even like the place where this wasn't shot in Arizona, right?
Yeah.
So even like where that car overturned, you're going to be like, oh, there's shrub grass everywhere,
Yeah.
right? Like this is actually kind of like a nice area instead of feeling like what a desolate wasteland. It feels like New Mexico, and it's like the British countryside or something.
Yeah. No, that's the thing, is it? That's what I kept thinking. Like, you'd probably have to sort of like, you'd roll over those hills and you'd have something sort of like Jerusalem playing in the background where you'd be like, oh, no, wrong story. That's not the wrong sense of what you wanted this. See, about poetic, one of the things I'm sort of reflecting on as we've gone through this series, and this season in particular, and when we do a sort of an overview, I think it'll be worth thinking about, but probably the last two series, where there's sort of 6 episodes, they feel like a collection of short stories. Do you know what I mean? Like I could imagine this being like a collection of if he hadn't have made these into scripts for television, like I could imagine this being like Charlie Brooker's sort of like the Black Mirror volume 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kind of thing, short stories. And this episode feels a little bit like that, one of those sort of experimental stories you'll find in collections where you've had like in science fiction, I can imagine sort of Arthur C. Clarke or Philip K. Dick doing this in one of theirs, where like it's a very short story, all told from a certain person's perspective. And again, like it'll just be like it'll start with a chase and it'll end with a chase. And it's just this glimpse of this one thing, and that's it. And but it's done in such a way that's very poetic, and that the sort of the way they've written it, and it feels like that. Like you're going to get that kind of sort of story in one of those, and I think that's almost why I appreciate it for that as well. That it sort of gives us that.
I really like what you're saying, and I kind of feel the same way. I mean, and it's worth connecting this to the previous episode, which you disliked. That that's sort of like in this, like I'm going to do another Black Mirror short story collection. That's the love episode, right? This is the experimental, like one long chase scene, sort of, and and I think that some of those experiments, some of those stories are going to work better than others. And we can go back and say, yeah, you should have spent more time on this one, or thought about X, Y, and Z, which is totally legitimate and correct to do. But I think that, it's also worth pointing out that I always feel like each one is its own little genre or its own little take on something. Like obviously Callister is sort of Star Trek. Archangel is, this kind of childhood, Carrie-like kind of, more limited story. Crocodile is sort of this Nordic noir thing. Then you get a love story, and then you get this like experimental, almost, largely silent pursuit film. And some of these things are going to work more than others. And I guess I'm, kind of forgiving of that. I mean, I think what's annoying is the Black Mirror fandom. Is the like, this is the greatest show since sliced bread. It's so smart, it's so brilliant. I mean, you get that with a lot of fans. Like Rick and Morty got tagged as smart show, and and it's like, no, it's funny, but it's not nearly as smart as you think. When it works, it's funny, and it doesn't always work. But I think that fandom is bad. But I do kind of like. I find myself feeling more forgiving when I consider that sort of short story kind of format, that it's still trying new things, even if they don't always work.
Well, I'm going to say I think this. I'm just flicking through, and so far, like, there's been episodes I've liked more and episodes I've liked less, and so other stuff. But the one thing I'll say about 3 and 4 is the seasons 3 and 4. They do have that feel of going, well, we're going to try this, and I've got more money, so we are going to do like, even Nosedive, the one with from the very first episode of season 3. Like, yeah, okay, I didn't like it, but it's trying something different, and it was going for something as a sort of story and stuff, and you have those different things. So I think, I can appreciate the attempts to try different genres. The thing is, the thing I think that I find frustrating is one of the things we've said about Twilight Zone. Obviously, we make this comparison almost every episode now because it's just there to be made. One of the things we've said about Rod Serling and the other people that wrote those episodes, like that was being banged out week on week. Mm-hmm. And there were times when people were like, we need an episode, go make one. And it was like, right, I want it on my desk by Monday. And, here's a weekend, go write something. Right, we're filming on Monday, bang, get on with it. And some of those episodes show, but like, that's a quick turnaround. This was years between seasons. I mean, it's a whole year, really. But like, it's not... when they're rushed, it feels a bit like I'm going like, well, you had time to go through these.
Yeah.
But then like Metalhead feels like one where it's like, no, this didn't need much more. Like this is an episode where this isn't in the writing, this is in the presentation. And I like the presentation, which is why I think it works for me.
Yeah, I'm finding that, I think that's true. I wonder about the sort of like, do we handicap stuff that we know was done quickly? And is that fair? I mean, ultimately, what's on the screen is what's on the screen, right? It's like, you wrote this paper last night, you took a month to write it. It doesn't really matter to me as the teacher,
yeah,
right?
The score's the score. Yeah.
Right. What's on the page is what's on the page. I don't care. It doesn't affect me one way or the other. But I do think that it does feel, but some of that is also the difference between handicapping something that's older and didn't have this kind of budget available, and is also in that half-hour format. I mean, it's worth pointing out that this is one of the shortest episodes of Metalhead. It's like 41 minutes. It's one of the shortest, and it uses that runtime. Yes. Every minute feels filled. And I think that's a great argument for shorter's better, edit the stuff down. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. Maybe we should take our own advice on that one.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I think that's it. I'm not, it's a short episode. It works for me. It's a good episode. It's a minimal episode. And I really enjoyed this. It's one of those weird ones where I would say, I've been into these episodes where I've gone, would I want a full series, or would I like a further exploration of this world? This is one where I'd be like, yeah, cool. I'd maybe not this episode, but I'd like to see some more in this world. I'd like to know more about these robots and stuff. It's kind of interesting. But I'm happy just to leave it at this little thing and just have it as that. Anyway, Julian, any final thoughts then on Metalhead?
No, I think it works. I think it's limited in its scope, but it uses that to great effect. And here are those limits and lack of world building and lack of dialogue even. I think much like, Fury Road kind of narrowed the focus, and as long as everything is working, and it really is, I mean, we can gripe about like, why is that paint so wet if it's been sitting there for so many years? Yeah. I mean, there are little things like that, but they're really minor, and all of it's working, and I'm very happy with it, and I'm very happy with this season, actually.
Yeah, well, we've got one more episode to go, so let's see how we feel about it at the end of the day. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, there we go. If you agree with us or you don't disagree with us, see what you say. Come and find us on social medias at PodTimeSpace on the Twitters, or X, as it is now called, and has been for months. So come find us. Other than that, if you do like us, leave a review on your podcast catcher. We appreciate all feedback. And if you really like us, come check out our Patreon, www.patreon.com/20CG Media, and you will find way more trekking through the Twilight Zone on there. And you'll understand why we make these comparisons all the time. Anyway, Julian, thank you very much. Been good discussion. And
Absolutely.
thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you on the next episode.
There's something very important I forgot to tell you. What? Don't cross the streams.